So St. Teresa of Avila is a very interesting saint. She's a very colourful character. I think a lot of the time we squash saints, or like have this kind of cookie cutter understanding of saints, that in order to be a saint you should be really, really boring, probably old, and like you probably prayed a lot and maybe died with your head over there, kind of thing. But we kind of forget that there are as many ways of being a saint as there are people, right? Every life lived to the full, every life lived out of love for God is a holy life, and that person can be a saint. So there are very, very many ways of becoming a saint, and very many roots and pitfalls and mistakes that can take place beforehand. As they say, every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. So it's interesting. It's very interesting to see Saint Teresa's life, because she considered herself a horrific sinner as a teenager. Why? Because she liked boys. She did. And the whole flirting thing, and dresses and dressing up, and all of that kind of frivolousness, frivolosity, whatever the word is, either or. Just that kind of superficial lifestyle. She had a dad who was very, very strict, and a mom who had the vice of reading romance novels, otherwise known as the then equivalent of Love Island, I guess. I don't know, whatever it was. But so she'd kind of hide them, keep them from her father's sight. And then, but when Teresa would see her reading, she said, "Don't tell your dad." So she kind of found herself in this moral dilemma of being told not to lie, but being told not to tell your dad. And so he meant it well, her dad, but he was very, very strict. And seeing her teen years being lived out in such a superficial manner, it was considered by all to be a good idea for her to go to the convent. That's the best solution. To this day, it remains that if anyone is, unruly, send them off to the convent. That's the way to fix it. Okay. Now, of course, there are many, very, very, very many issues with such a reaction. Keeping in mind as well, this is 1515. This is a mental time in history. So America has just been discovered about a little less than 20 years beforehand. So that there are these, a lot of people with money or the ability want to go to this new promised land and start a new lifestyle, a new life, and the gold rushes and all those kind of things, So there's that. Then in Europe, you have the chaos of the Reformation, which is going to happen soon. So it's a time of great turmoil. Not so unlike our own. I find it very interesting to read a saint from 1515, and a lot of what's being described, if that was happening now, apart from discovering new parts of the planet, I think we've that more or less done. But like the turmoil they describe, the unrest, the lack of surety, I think it's something that's still very, very present today. Okay, so she entered the Carmelites. Now, as can happen, any good group, one founds an order, and the founder is there, and it's all good because everyone dives in and everyone has, I suppose, clear answers to questions because the founder is there. But a couple of 100 years later, did they really mean that we should fast? Did they really mean that what do you mean poverty? Like, poverty. I mean, poverty. Surely, if you have 16 pairs of shoes and someone else is 100, you're poor having 16. So, what's poverty? So life in the convents became quite superficial, quite like dangerously worldly, where those of a more noble background with more money would have a veil that was made out of silk, while everyone else had cotton, and then they'd kind of lace it inside then. And then, like jewellery, now again, jewellery isn't the end of the world, but it's just pennies didn't exist, so jewellery was probably expensive and it was probably real. So it was a way of kind of showing, bling, I'm rich and you're a mere peasant, So this was the kind of standards, different kind of levels of how people were seen or respected within the convent. So they also even had things known as parties in the convent, right? Which may have also included boys. Now, we won't go ... but it was like, it's a convent but there's just something wrong. When you read the accounts of what her early religious life was like, this isn't really it. This isn't really what we're called to be. And then the spiritual, in order to kind of make up for that, because they knew there were nuns at the same time, then to make up for that, there'd be all these kind of fake ecstasies, and then exaggerated penances, and all these kind of things going on, So, like, it was a bit of a mess in the convent. And Teresa had this gift, kind of like St. Francis, that she was likable, she was fun, she was smart, evidently smart by her writings. So she was good company. And as can often happen, people who are likable, they like to be liked. They like when people like them. It's nice when people laugh at your jokes. It's nice when people find you interesting. It's nice when people, look for your company. But then see the danger of that then is you play for that. You want to say things and do things that'll make you likable. So even though her superior asked her to give lessons on prayer, because this is something that's very close to her heart, mental prayer, she charged for it. And she says herself that she enjoyed the compliments and oh my goodness, you're such a saint and all this kind of thing. So even the nuns were actually encouraged to, in order to save money in the convent, to leave the convent for extended periods of time. So to go back to their families or whatever, and then come back to the convent. But not good. Okay, so here we have this sister with ability. So she's actually trying to live this practice of mental prayer. Now she feels like she's getting nowhere, but it's just her life isn't really corresponding to it, and the environment she's in is again not really conducive to sanctity. So she doesn't feel like she's making much progress. Now, in her late 30s, and I find this really, it's kind of a negative thing, but one of the things I like most about St. Teresa of Avila is that in her late 30s she falls ill with malaria, and she's practically left paralyzed for about 3 years. But rather than this experience turning her back to God, in my weakness I discovered, the sweet relief of a relationship with Jesus, no, it actually led her to spiritual laziness. I'm too weak to pray, and I'm too great a sinner. I would not burden the good Lord with my words. And so, again, because she's smart, she's able to convince herself of these things. And so her illness kind of led her away further from God. At one point she fell into such a deep coma, they thought she was dead. And when she woke up, she realized that they had dug a grave for her. That could have ended very, very badly, right? So she woke up and said, yeah, that was for you. We decided we planted a few roses in there instead, but right, so that could have been, again, a very blunt end to her story. Okay. So, but then something happens, right? She meets a priest, and this priest talks to her about the importance of prayer. Now, again, like the word prayer, we've heard it a million times. She had heard it a million times. She'd even spoken, taught about it a million times. But it was just something, like, again, she's 41 now at this point, and this priest talks to her about like getting back to basics, getting back to prayer. And she has this in German they call it an aha experience. She has this moment where she goes, wow, I really need to get my act together. What have I been doing? I've been trying to sit in two stools here for 20 years, trying to sit in the comforts of life and the compliments of people, and at the same time trying to kind of please God, and then scooting between the two, and you're never really at peace with either, because what if we just gave God everything? And she decides to start living a life, living her vocation to the full, or to the best of her ability, right? Now, you would imagine that would be absolutely fantastic, and that she would be met with great applause and approval. No, the sisters hated her. Many of them hated her, because now she was raising the bar. So now, rather than saying, we shouldn't be having parties. What do you mean we've always had parties? We've always had these people over. We shouldn't. we should be living in poverty. What do you mean you live in poverty? You know, I've grown up with noble blood. I am a, they use some Sanchez. I am a Sanchez, right? And we own half of wherever it is. Who are you to say I can't have my rings? So it did not go down well, as is often the case for those who try to raise the standard. So this was very, very difficult. Now some recognized the sanctity in her and the truth of what she was saying. So it was another 10 years though before she would be able to start traveling around, founding new convents. And even then, there were all sorts of problems because she was seen as a troublemaker. Keep in mind, this is the early 16th century. Church and state in a lot of places, it's all kind of mixed up. So people wanted, the rulers wanted the approval of the religious, because then you control everything. If you control people, the land, the civil life, and basically you control the church, you are almighty. You can do anything because no one is going to contradict you. Whereas now she comes along and says, no, it's not really the case. So she was seriously unpopular. She'd arrive at towns and she'd have to have an armed guard to get to the convent. Or she got to one particular convent once, and they woke up the following morning and some locals had ripped off the side wall of the house, you know, the way you be. She must have slept fairly soundly that night. My God, now that I think of it. So she was not popular. She was not popular at all at the time. But in all this, she was deepening this understanding of mental prayer. For mental prayer, in my opinion, is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with Him who we know loves us. The important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and to do that which best stirs you to love. There's just an elegant simplicity in what she's saying here. You know, it's not that you have to sit there and kind of try really hard and concentrate or say lots of prayers. Saying lots of prayers, it's good, and it's good that one tries. But mental prayer, she's saying, is just means taking time frequently to be alone with Him who loves us, just to be with the Lord. That's contemplation. That's contemplative prayer. You know, so just to simply be with the Lord. Okay, so she had mystical experiences as well, also levitations, and when it happened, she asked the sisters to sit on her. Because she didn't want, like, she wanted her prayer to be a kind of a private thing. She didn't want people saying, "Oh my goodness, you're so holy," or whatever. She wanted to keep these things to herself. So she actually saw them almost as kind of chastisements. "Oh Lord, I don't want to be levitating. Oh, here we go," you know, because I don't want. You know, she actually saw them as kind of punishments for her wasted years. Okay, her biggest fault was her friendships, though. This was the thing that she found it hardest to let go of. You know, although she wasn't sinning, she was still very attached to people's approval. You know, liking to be liked in that. And God asked of her a sacrifice, now that He was not asking of us necessarily, but for her this was necessary. He said to her, "No longer do I want you to converse with human beings, but with angels." You know, again, He's not saying to all of us we can't have friends, but in her case, this was a necessary break in order to devote her life to the Lord. On one particular occasion, she got permission to found a convent, which she did, from a local king. And then, lo and behold, the princess of said king turns up at the door with all of her bags and baggage and servants. Says, "I shall enter here." And Teresa says, "Not with all them you want." So she did enter, but then she wanted the nuns to serve her on their knees. And St. Teresa said, "No, these sisters will not serve you on their knees." So then said princess reported St. Teresa of Avila to the Inquisition. "You are a witch." Crazy times. Absolutely crazy times. Anyway, so it's just very interesting, because I think we can often think that saints just, you know, I don't know, they prayed a bit and they were grand and they were all holy and then they died. But like she suffered an awful lot of opposition, all sorts of opposition as well. But it's interesting that, how do they say it in the world of marketing? No such thing as bad publicity. All of these stories then of her reputation and of her raising the bar and getting kicked out of this city and that city actually started drawing young girls who are actually interested in actually giving themselves to the Lord to her. So then she starts to gain novices, and found more and more reformed Carmelite convents around the place. So, what can we learn from her? Two things. One, that I think the fact that she discovers her vocation to a much deeper level relatively late in life. Keep in mind, like, this is 15th, 16th century, so the healthcare system was kind of non-existent. It consisted more or less of a saw and a hammer for most things, and maybe flat 7-Up and a cold rag. That was probably the extent of the healthcare system. Okay, so people didn't live very long. So when she begins her conversion or rediscovery at the age of 41, that's relatively late in life. But she does so, which I think teaches us that it's actually never too late to rediscover prayer. It's never too late to kind of start again. It's never too late. Not really a problem for most of you now because you're relatively young. But it's never too late to rediscover the Lord. And secondly, mental prayer. You see, the way she describes it is, it's so simple, you see. It's actually something that we can be doing much more than we think, much more often when one is working. Like, we have our sacristan at the moment now. She'll be up around after Mass and busy buzzing around and moving things here and there and cleaning things up. And then during that, she can actually be engaged in mental prayer, which, as we heard, it means taking time frequently to be alone with Him who loves us. Just to be alone with God. If you're working in an office, walking from the chapel here down to the lodge, driving to work, whatever you're doing, taking time to be alone with God. And I think, if I may add, this isn't from St. Teresa of Avila now, but for most of us, and especially I think for us lads, push through the awkwardness. Right? Because you might be kind of, "Hi Jesus, it's me. Don't really know what to say. How's things? Haven't seen the forecast for heaven. Is weather good up there?" So it's kind of a busy day coming up. Would mind a bit of help with a few old things there now, and stay with it, because like you see, this is all the kind of the awkward bit. This is the awkward bit of prayer. This isn't how I pray usually, right? But like, what you don't do is finish it up with Christ the Lord, Amen, and push through the awkwardness until you actually get to this kind of quieter time where you can just actually be with the Lord. Don't end it just because you've said everything that was on your mind at the time. Stay with it. Stay with it. And give the Lord time to answer, give Him time to speak, give Him time to, and also believe, like, trust what you're hearing. At times, when we have a time of silent prayer, and we might feel the Lord is giving us some consolation, but no, He wouldn't really talk to. He wouldn't talk to me. Like, I mean, I'm not a mystic or anything, so no. And then we discount that God can actually talk to us, and then you miss the gift that He was offering, the consolation the guidance that He was offering you. You miss it because you think, He wouldn't. I couldn't. I don't. No. So push through that kind of awkwardness at the beginning of prayer. Stay with it. And believe what the Lord says to you. And the Lord is a great teacher, like, because He'll start teaching you through small things, things that seem insignificant, like, would you like to stay 5 more minutes with me? Or He might remind you of something that you have to do, or something that you might need to cut out. Small little things, no one else is going to notice, and there's nothing kind of, mystical in the sense of levitations here. It's just small little directions. Now, if you're faithful to them, then you're ready then for the slightly bigger things. If I'm ready to be obedient to the Lord in the small things of the day, then I'm ready to be obedient to Him in the medium things of the day. And if I get used to obeying Him in those kind of things as well, like forgiveness of people, or if I have a free hour, what I should do with it, if I get used to obeying him in those things, then I'm ready for him to reveal my vocation, or the much bigger issues, But he starts by training us with the small things. And if I get used to obeying him in those, then he can trust me with more. But if I never get used to obeying him in those things, he won't trust me with more, because I'm not ready. So that's why this idea, this reality of prayer and mental prayer is just so important. Because the more I get used to being with him and listening to him and obeying him, the quicker and the more he can guide me. Prayer is nothing else than an intimate sharing between friends. It means taking time frequently to be alone with him who we know loves us. The important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and to do that which best stirs you to love. The end of that quotation is, love is not great delight, but desire to please God in everything. Love isn't necessarily great delight. It's not necessarily immediately fulfilling or satisfying. It's not necessarily joyful at the time. But it's a desire to please God in everything. So we ask St. Teresa to teach us today, to teach us to listen to the Lord and to obey his word as we spend time with him who longs for us. Amen.